Imagine discovering that someone close to you is not who they claim to be. It could be a trusted friend, a police officer, a family member, perhaps even the person staring back at you from the mirror. Most of Spider-Man's enemies attack him with extraordinary weapons or overwhelming strength. The Green Goblin has explosives. Doctor Octopus has his 4 mechanical arms and his supreme scientific mind. Venom possesses power equal to Spider-Man's own. But today's supervillain needs none of these things. He can assume any face, imitate any voice, and infiltrate almost any location. He rarely attacks Spider-Man directly. Instead, he turns the hero's own world against him. Long before Spider-Man faced his most famous enemies, one enemy was already waiting in the shadows. In fact, he was the first costumed criminal Spider-Man ever confronted. But behind the guises was a man who spent his entire life pretending to be someone else. A forgotten child who became so skilled at changing his identity, he eventually lost any true identity of his own. Today, this is the story of Dmitri Smerdyakov, otherwise known as the Chameleon. Dmitri Smerdyakov was born in Russia as the illegitimate son of a powerful family. From the beginning, he was treated as an embarrassment, an unwanted child, lacking any of the status or privileges enjoyed by the rest of the family. Most importantly, Dmitri lived in the shadow of his half-brother, Sergei Kravenov. Sergei was everything Dmitri was not. He was strong, confident, respected. Dmitri, by comparison, was always regarded as weak and insignificant. Though the two boys were related by blood, Dmitri was often treated more like a servant than a brother. He admired Sergei and desperately sought his approval. But Sergei could also be cruel. Dmitri was mocked, intimidated, and frequently reminded of his inferior position within the family. Unable to compete with Sergei physically, Dmitri discovered another way to attract his attention. He learned to imitate people. Dmitri copied the voices and mannerisms of those around him. He impersonated neighbours, servants, fellow members of the household. What began as entertainment gradually became a survival mechanism. When Dmitri performed, people noticed him. When he became someone else, he was no longer the unwanted child. Every new identity offered a temporary escape from his own life. Over time, Dmitri became an exceptional actor and impressionist. He studied how people walked, how they spoke, how they reacted under pressure. He could reproduce voices with astonishing accuracy and alter his appearance using makeup, masks, and carefully designed costumes. His talent gave him a power that physical strength never could. Dmitri could enter places where he did not belong. He could manipulate people who would otherwise ignore him. He could become almost anyone. But there was a price to pay. The more time Dmitri spent pretending to be other people, the less value he placed on being himself. Eventually, he stopped regarding identity as something permanent. To him, a face became simply another tool, something to be worn, used, and ultimately discarded. Dmitri Smerdyakov gradually disappeared beneath his disguises. In his place emerged the supervillain known as the Chameleon. Eventually, Dmitri would leave Russia. He headed to New York to begin using his talents as a spy and professional criminal. Unlike the other flamboyant villains who would later terrorize New York, the Chameleon preferred to remain invisible. He did not need to smash through walls or theatrically announce his presence. He simply walked through the front door, wearing someone else's face. His disguises allowed him to steal confidential information, manipulate government officials, and escape before anyone realized a crime had even taken place. But one ambitious operation would bring him into conflict with a newly emerged hero of New York, the hero we today call Spider-Man. At this point, Spider-Man was still inexperienced. New York did not yet know whether he was a hero, a menace, or simply another masked vigilante. The Chameleon recognized this as an opportunity. Disguising himself as Spider-Man, Dmitri attempted to steal sensitive military documents. His plan was simple but effective. Commit the crime while wearing Spider-Man's identity, and then allow the authorities to blame the real hero. It was one of the earliest attempts by any supervillain to weaponize Spider-Man's reputation against him. Peter Parker suddenly found himself hunted for a crime he had not committed. To clear his name, he had to find the imposter responsible. Spider-Man eventually exposed the deception and captured the Chameleon. But Dmitri's plan revealed something important about the young hero that day. Spider-Man's greatest vulnerability was never physical. His vulnerability was his identity. Peter Parker lived two separate lives. In one, he was an ordinary young man with friends, responsibilities, and loved ones. In his other life, he was a masked hero, feared by criminals and distrusted by large elements of the public. The Chameleon was uniquely equipped to attack both sides of Spider-Man's life. He had become Spider-Man's first recurring supervillain, and the first enemy to understand that a stolen identity can be more dangerous than any weapon. Unlike any villain that Spider-Man had encountered up until that point in his young career, this defeat did not end the Chameleon's criminal ambitions. Instead, it made his conflict with Spider-Man personal. Dmitri knew he could not defeat Spider-Man in a physical confrontation. The hero was too fast, too strong, and protected by an almost supernatural sense for when danger was upon him. So, the Chameleon turned to the one man he believed could overpower Spider-Man, his half-brother, Sergei Kravenov. By this time, Sergei had transformed himself into the internationally renowned hunter, calling himself Kraven. He had travelled the world, pursuing increasingly dangerous animals. But hunting such prey no longer satisfied him. The Chameleon encouraged Kraven to come to New York and hunt Spider-Man, the most elusive human target in the world. For Dmitri, this gambit served two purposes. If Kraven succeeded, Spider-Man would be destroyed. But Dmitri could also prove his value to the brother whose approval he had sought since his early childhood. The challenge appealed to Kraven's pride. He accepted, and thus begun one of the most famous rivalries in Spider-Man's history. Yet, ultimately, Kraven also failed. Spider-Man survived the hunt and defeated both of the brothers. This established a pattern that would define their relationship for years. The Chameleon would create traps, gather intelligence, and manipulate events from behind the scenes. Kraven would provide the strength and aggression, the two elements Dmitri lacked. Together, they were dangerous. But this partnership was never equal. Kraven remained the celebrated warrior, while Dmitri remained the figure in the shadows. Even after becoming a feared criminal in his own right, the Chameleon could still not escape his brother's influence. Sergei was more than his partner. He was Dmitri's hero, tormentor, and symbol of everything he believed he could never become. In his early days, the Chameleon relied entirely on skill. He used makeup, wigs, costumes, and carefully manufactured masks. He observed his targets, studied their behaviour, and reproduced their voices. But as technology advanced, so too did the Chameleon's tactics. He obtained devices capable of altering his appearance almost instantaneously. Holographic systems allowed him to reproduce a person's face, while specially designed clothing could change its colour and shape at his command. His disguises became so convincing that even close friends could be deceived. Eventually, Dmitri enhanced his own body. Experimental treatments left him with pale, almost featureless skin that he could reshape into a variety of faces. The transformation made his appearance more disturbing than ever. When the Chameleon was not impersonating someone else, he seemed to have no face at all. This blank appearance was more than a side effect of his abilities. It was a metaphor for what Dmitri had become. There was no longer a stable person beneath the disguises, only a blank canvas awaiting its next identity. The Chameleon's methods also changed. He was no longer simply stealing documents or impersonating Spider-Man. He began infiltrating criminal organisations, government agencies, and the lives of extremely powerful individuals. He could manufacture conflicts without anyone realising he was involved. He could issue orders using the face of a trusted leader. He could turn allies against one another and disappear long before the truth emerged. Spider-Man's strength and agility meant very little against such an enemy. Peter Parker could lift tremendous weights, cling to walls, react to danger almost instantly. But none of those abilities could tell him whether the person standing in front of him was genuine or whether it was the Chameleon. This forced Spider-Man to doubt everything he saw, and with every successful deception, Dmitri moved closer to his most dangerous realization. To destroy Spider-Man, he did not need to defeat the hero. He needed to destroy Peter Parker. It was with this in mind that the Chameleon would carry out his cruelest attack yet on Spider-Man. It involved two people Peter Parker had believed were lost to him forever: his parents. Peter had grown up with his Aunt May and Uncle Ben after the apparent deaths of Richard and Mary Parker. Their absences had left a permanent void in his life. Then, without warning, Richard and Mary appeared to return. For Peter, it seemed impossible. Yet the couple possessed convincing memories and knew intimate details about his childhood. Peter badly wanted to believe them. For a time, he allowed himself to imagine that the family he had lost had finally been restored. But the truth was far more sinister. This supposed Richard and Mary Parker were actually sophisticated artificial duplicates, created as part of a plot involving the Chameleon and Harry Osborn. Harry, suffering from his own psychological decline, had discovered Peter's secret identity and wanted revenge. Before his death, he set a scheme in motion designed to attack Peter at the deepest emotional level possible. The Chameleon would play an integral part in bringing this plan to life. The artificial parents were not designed merely to spy on Peter. They were meant to earn his trust, become part of his life, and then reveal that this newfound happiness had all been a lie. When the deception was finally exposed, Peter was devastated. This was no ordinary supervillain attack. No city had been threatened. No giant machine had to be destroyed. Instead, the Chameleon had reached into Peter Parker's childhood, identified his deepest emotional wounds, and deliberately reopened them. The experience pushed Peter close to a psychological breaking point. It also demonstrates why the Chameleon is so dangerous. He did not simply wear another person's face. He weaponized the love attached to that face. For the Chameleon, however, the plan also had another purpose. Dmitri wanted absolute confirmation that Peter Parker and Spider-Man were indeed the same person. By studying Peter's reactions and manipulating his private life, he finally learned the truth. From that point forward, the Chameleon no longer needed to attack Spider-Man in costume. Instead, he could target Peter Parker's friends, family, and home. But gaining this knowledge did not give Dmitri the sense of victory he anticipated. Instead, his obsession with Spider-Man only deepened. As the years passed, the Chameleon's connection to Spider-Man became ever more personal and increasingly unstable. Dmitri was fascinated by Peter Parker because Peter possessed something he did not: a genuine identity. Peter wore a mask, but Spider-Man was not a replacement for Peter Parker. Both identities could coexist. Both were expressions of the same person. Peter knew who he was, even when his responsibilities pulled him in different directions. Dmitri had no such foundation. The Chameleon could become a government official, a criminal leader, or one of Peter's closest friends. But when the performance ended, there was nothing beneath it except another disguise. This emptiness led to moments of severe psychological trauma for Dmitri. During one confrontation, Dmitri attempted to convince Peter that his entire life as Spider-Man had been an illusion. He constructed an elaborate false reality in which Peter was supposedly an ordinary man experiencing a mental breakdown. The Chameleon hoped to make Peter surrender his identity completely. But Peter resisted. He had already endured tragedy, guilt, and loss. Yet none of those experiences had given him a stronger understanding of himself. Dmitri's illusions could confuse Spider-Man, but they could not permanently erase the person that Peter Parker was beneath that mask. Once again, the Chameleon failed. His reaction revealed the emotional desperation behind his crimes. Dmitri did not merely hate Peter Parker. On some level, he was desperate to understand him. During another encounter, the Chameleon admitted his loneliness and expressed a disturbing emotional attachment to this man he had spent years tormenting. When Peter reacted with shock and nervous disbelief, Dmitri threw himself from a bridge. Although he survived, the incident exposed the truth behind the Chameleon's obsession. Dmitri envied Peter Parker. Peter had endured terrible loss, but he still had friends, family, and purpose. Dmitri possessed thousands of faces, but no meaningful human connections. Every disguise allowed him to enter someone else's life, but none would ever allow him to build a life of his own. The Chameleon continued to operate in the shadows, sometimes aligning with larger groups of villains, and sometimes pursuing his own schemes. He continued to impersonate political figures, military personnel, and at times even other superheroes. He infiltrated supposedly secure facilities and manipulated some of the most powerful people in the world. At various points, he's worked alongside members of the Sinister Six. But unlike most of Spider-Man's enemies, Dmitri was rarely motivated by simple wealth or destruction. Information was, and remains, his greatest weapon. He collected secrets, created false identities, constructed networks of agents who could disappear into society. In the conspiracy that eventually carried his name, Spider-Man discovered that Dmitri's operations were even larger than expected. The Chameleon was not necessarily working alone. Other operatives had been altered and trained to function just like him. These agents could assume new identities, infiltrate organizations, and leave their victims questioning everything they had believed. The possibility of multiple chameleons made Dmitri even more dangerous to Spider-Man. Capturing one imposter no longer guaranteed that the threat was over. A familiar face could conceal another agent. A trusted ally could be replaced without warning. Even Dmitri's personal history became difficult to separate from his numerous fabrications. Was he telling the truth about his childhood? Had he been manipulated by criminal forces from an early age? Were the secrets he revealed genuine, or simply another layer to the ongoing deception? With the Chameleon, certainty is impossible, and that was always his greatest advantage. Spider-Man can defeat the person standing in front of him, but he can never be completely certain that he has uncovered the entire plan. The Chameleon has never possessed the fame of the Green Goblin, or the overwhelming power of Venom. Yet, his place in Spider-Man's history is undeniable. He was there at the beginning, Spider-Man's first costumed criminal adversary, and one of the first villains to turn the hero's public identity against him. But Dmitri Smerdyakov's story is about more than disguises. It is the story of a neglected child who learned that people valued him more when he pretended to be someone else. What began as a method of earning attention became a criminal weapon, then an obsession. Finally, it consumed him completely. Dmitri can reproduce almost any face and imitate almost any voice. But the one person he has never learned to become is himself. Perhaps this is why Spider-Man remains his perfect enemy. Both men wear masks. Both have lived between two identities. Both have experienced rejection, guilt, and loss. But where Peter Parker uses his mask to reveal the best parts of himself, Dmitri uses his disguises to conceal the emptiness within. So, is the Chameleon simply a master of disguise? Or is he something far more terrifying? A man who erased his own identity and now survives by stealing the lives of others. Whatever face he wears next, one truth remains. When the Chameleon enters your life, anyone can be the enemy. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the history of the Chameleon, please remember to like this video and subscribe to the Supervillain Codex for more stories exploring the origins, lives, and legacies of fiction's greatest villains. Until next time, remember, every villain has a story to tell.